Today, we are going to get a little bit meta because every Wednesday I focus on one area where you might be feeling stuck, and then I try and unpack and show you the different reasons why you might be stuck because it's not always the most obvious thing, and two people can be stuck on the same thing but have very different reasons why. Well, today I'm doing something a little different, which is talking about when you know you're stuck and you know that you need to take action and you don't do it. So it's actually, why am I struggling to get unstuck? So maybe you've watched one of these videos and said, oh, this is giving me some really good insight into maybe why I can't keep a morning routine or exercise regularly or get to bed on time. But then you don't do anything about it. So this is very common, and I like to refer to it as the personal development trap. In other words, you learn about something, you have an aha moment, you get it, you realize, yes, this is what I have to do. And then you don't do it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Why does that happen? And why do you actually have problems getting unstuck? Now, if we have not met before, my name is Kat, and I help people uncover the hidden reasons that they're stuck so they can break free and start thriving. Now, I realize that this is kind of a mind-bendy one, and it is a meta topic. Why am I struggling to get unstuck? Now, this is all about when we recognize that we're stuck, we want to make a change, we feel like you need to take action, but we're not doing anything about it. And as always, I like to come back to the 3 different ways we get stuck because there are different ways that it happens. So the first is if you're missing information or skills, so you just actually don't have the ability to move forward. The second is if you're missing information or skills about yourself, so working against yourself by accident. And finally, an adaptive challenge. This is where you know what to do, you know how to do it, but you still aren't doing it. And this is where we need to unpack what are some of the fears and limiting beliefs that are holding you back and keeping you stuck. And once we know that there are different ways we get stuck, and sometimes it's a combination, it allows us to unpack in a procedural way, asking one question at a time. Let's take a look. So, why can't I get unstuck? Let's look at this. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is look at, are we missing skills or information? So in this case, when we're talking about why I can't seem to make progress on a change that's really important to me. So the first question is, what is it specifically that you want to change? Because that's a really important question. If you don't actually know what the behavior looks like on the other end, then it's going to be hard for you to know exactly how you should change, because you need to know what it is you're actually changing. And this might sound vague, but one of the things I recommend is take a look at a person who is currently doing what you wish you were doing. How would you describe their behavior? What do they do differently than you? That's a really great place to start because you have evidence of a person who is actually doing the thing you want to do. And if you are able to describe what it is they do, then you should be able to more readily identify the thing that you actually want to change. But it is a really important question. And the other thing I want to say on that note is that it's also important to say, am I solving the right problem? For example, I've talked about getting enough sleep, getting to bed on time, and also a morning routine. Those things are all connected, but they are different things. Sometimes we actually have to spend a little bit of time getting specific on what is the thing that has to change for me to be successful. Because they're connected, but they're not always the same. In other words, are you solving the right problem? Okay, next on this list is, what challenge are you facing? So if you have come along with me before, or if you are familiar with the immunity to change process, you'll know that I talk about technical and adaptive challenges. And this is like these 3 ways we get stuck. So what is the challenge? Are you missing information and you need to hone your skills? You need to learn some new things. Now, when it comes to getting unstuck, you might need to learn some practical skills of, how do I notice my thoughts? How do I challenge my beliefs? How do I uncover those things? You might need to actually build some skills in that area. And that's a really important thing for you to notice. Now, if you are facing more of an adaptive challenge, that's where you have to say, okay, I know I need to change my limiting beliefs, but I'm not doing it. So what's happening? And we'll get there in a moment. Finally, I want you to think about what processes are actually available to you. So a really great example is there a book that will help you overcome a roadblock? so that you can start thriving and you can start doing what you want to do. You can adopt that new behavior. Is there a process you can follow, whether that is joining a program or working with a coach, or what are your options? Because there are a lot of options out there to help people to change. There is no shortage whatsoever. So identify what they are when it comes to the change that you specifically want to make, and it should be addressing the actual challenge. So if it's a technical challenge you're facing, you want a solution that helps you build your skills. But if you are having limiting beliefs, you want to make sure that the solution is addressing these limiting beliefs and challenging those beliefs. All right, now we want to get this second area. So this is where we're missing information about ourselves, and sometimes we are inadvertently working against our own tendency. Now, when it comes to getting unstuck and taking action towards making a change on our behavior, no matter what it is, it's helpful to know about ourselves. We do need to know about how we operate and what works well for us and what doesn't. So the first thing, and I bring this up a lot, is do you work well with external accountability? Because if you do, then make sure that's part of it. I work really well with external accountability, and I can say to myself, I really want to learn this new thing, or maybe I want to learn a new language. If no one is holding me accountable and I don't have any form of external accountability, you can be assured I am not going to learn that language, or maybe I'll binge some lessons on one weekend and then kind of stop for a while because there's no reason to keep me coming back to it. Whereas if I actually had somebody that I was meeting with regularly to practice speaking the new language or signing up for a class to learn it, that's different and that works for me. So what works for you? And is external accountability part of it? Because there's a good chance you might need that in some way. Now, the other thing is, what sort of pace or structure works really well for you? A great example is that you can have short, intensive things like going to a retreat weekend. Now, right now, there's not a ton of options because we have some restrictions. However, there are digital retreats or crash courses, or you could take a half day or full day intensive as a way to help you learn something or get past a hurdle. But on the other side, there are better paced things. So maybe it's over a few months that you're learning. Maybe it's over a year. What is the pace that works for you when it comes to approaching a challenge? Are you kind of all hands on deck, or do you want to stretch it out? Sometimes it's a combination. I know I've taken intensive retreats or retreat weekends, or sometimes I will take a course that lasts many months. And then finally, getting to know yourself. What do you prefer? Do you want to work on your own? Because there are some people for whom that works really well, is just to self-pace and do the work on their own, in their own way. This is really great for self-guided people who are able to keep that structure for themselves. Now, I also say DIY. DIY is usually if somebody maybe has a process or a product that you can purchase and just do it at a pace that works for you. Now, once again, you have to check in with yourself. Is that going to work? Or do you need a little bit more structure? Maybe you need a little bit more support. The other thing is coaches. When we're trying to change, there's a reason there are so many coaches out there, because coaches can really work for you. And it depends on what your need is. For example, if you're an entrepreneur and you need help with your business, maybe you need a business coach. And if maybe you have some limiting beliefs, perhaps you need a mindset coach. There are all sorts of coaches, but make sure that you're picking the right one based on the challenge that you're facing, which is why, back to step one, we want to make sure that we're actually addressing the appropriate challenge that you are facing, because that's a big thing to helping you to get unstuck. And then the other thing is a group. So is a group program the right thing for you? I know I've benefited from group programs, and I also run my own group program, and I know how powerful they can be. There's that accountability of being part of a group, and also you learn a lot from other people who are going through the same thing that you are. All right, so let's say that it's not these things, and the reason you are not getting unstuck is because of a mindset challenge. Well, this is where we have to look at fears. So with fears, there's a lot of stuff that can come up, and this list could have probably been triple of why we might not do the work to get unstuck. We know there's a problem. Maybe we know the roadblock, and we're not really doing anything about removing that roadblock. So what are some of these fears? Well, a really big one when it comes to doing the work, uncovering these roadblocks, uncovering mindset stuff, or even just building your ability, being vulnerable. So if we take back that example of learning a language, and let me know if you've been through learning a language as an adult? Let me know in the comments. But when you are learning a language, that feels kind of vulnerable. You might have a terrible accent when you try to speak. People might giggle when you try to pronounce words and you're getting it all wrong. That's an example of where you can feel vulnerable even just changing something that has to do with your skill or ability. But when you start to dig deeper, learning about yourself and learning about your limiting beliefs and maybe some of the things that you've been holding on to that you didn't know, that's vulnerable too. I mean, this is a situation where you are going to be faced with things that maybe you didn't know about yourself. And if you are doing it in a group or you're working with a coach or someone else, they're going to uncover that as you uncover that too. So that can feel really vulnerable, and that's a fear for a lot of people. Now, another is that maybe you feel like if I give this a proper try and I actually try to get unstuck, maybe I'll just let myself down. And this is one that I have felt deeply over the years, where I will start a new thing and then I feel like inevitably I'm starting over and over and over. Now, specifically, an example would be diet and exercise. I always feel like I get excited, I start to change, and then I stop, and then I just beat myself up and criticize myself. Now, some of the things I've learned over the years is that I didn't realize about the immune system that's keeping me stuck. I didn't realize about all these limiting beliefs at the time. I just thought that I lacked an ability and there was something wrong with me. So when it comes to change, if we have struggled before, sometimes we have a fear that if I just actually do this and I maybe have this intention of making a change, if it doesn't work, I'm just going to let myself down. And that's a crappy feeling. Nobody wants that feeling. Now, another fear, what if it works? And I have talked about this before, but sometimes we just don't feel equipped for what can happen if it works. What if we make the change? And what if we are successful? What are the repercussions of that happening? The main thing is that it's, for many of us, unknown territory, and that can be a little bit daunting. What if I finally start my business and it takes off and I don't know how to handle that? I don't know if I can do it. I don't know what's going to happen. Or what if I make a personal change in my life and it goes really well and I just don't know? So there's this fear of success because it's foreign for a lot of us in those situations, in the places where we feel stuck. Okay, another one. What if I become a different person or a different identity? And this is where we start to worry that if we make changes to ourselves and we start to do the work, we might not like who we become. And I think in particular, when it comes to getting unstuck around mindset stuff, we have these ideas about who changes and who takes these programs and who buys into maybe personal development work or taking courses or whatnot. So there's a lot behind that, and we'll talk more about that in the next section. Another one, this always comes up because it's always applicable, harm to relationships. What if I work on myself and I start to change, but maybe my significant other doesn't? Or maybe the rest of my family starts to resent me. Maybe my friends. If I'm on this track of self-transformation and making these changes and positive things in my life, and they're not, are they going to maybe judge me or not feel connected to me anymore? That's a valid fear that can happen for people. And the other thing I want to put in there when it comes to doing the work of uncovering why we're stuck and getting unstuck is confronting your shadow. Because when we start to ask these difficult questions around what are we afraid of, what do we believe, and how is that holding us back? Well, frankly, there's some shadow work there often. We have to confront the parts of ourselves that we are not proud of, the parts of ourselves that we are frustrated by, and that will come up in this work. And that can be a big fear, is just not wanting to go there. I don't want to look at the ugly parts of myself. But spoiler alert, we all have them. All right, now I want to talk about beliefs, because beliefs are the thing that drive these fears. We hold some sort of belief that this bad thing will happen and that this fear is inevitable and that we're going to experience it. So we stop ourselves from taking action. When it comes to getting unstuck, what are some of these beliefs that we might have that are causing us to have these fears? So one is, we have a lot of beliefs around vulnerability. And if you are a fan of Brené Brown, which I'm a huge fan, she talks a lot about vulnerability, and we have faulty beliefs around what it means to be vulnerable. So some of us genuinely believe that vulnerability is weak, and that if you actually are vulnerable and you open yourself up, that you might be exposed or harmed or controlled, or that other people will just judge you and think that you are weak. Now, I will say that if you learn about vulnerability, you know that it's connected to strengths and to being brave and putting yourself out there. But even when you know that logically, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a belief around vulnerability that is a negative one and that holds you back. Now, another one, when it comes to I'm worried that I'm just going to prove to myself that I can't change and this is the thing that's going to happen. Well, sometimes we have a belief that no matter what happens, we're not going to change. Our past experiences have taught us that we can't. Now, what I would argue is that in the past, maybe you were actually solving the wrong problem. You were just trying to change your skills and abilities, not ever addressing the underlying beliefs or just working against your own tendency for years and years and years. Well, of course you didn't change, but that doesn't mean that history of maybe failed attempts to change don't leave you feeling like you don't really believe that you're necessarily going to be able to change this time. Okay, what's another belief? Is maybe I'm not ready. So you might want to change. You don't like how you feel really stuck right now, and that's a terrible feeling. However, maybe you don't know that you're ready, and it's actually serving you in some way to be stuck for now. Maybe it gives you an excuse. Maybe it makes you feel connected to other people who are also struggling, or maybe you're just not ready for what's next. But it's possible that you believe you're not ready, even if maybe you are, and you have to challenge that. Another one is I don't want to be like that person. Now, this is when we have ideas in our head about other people who have maybe followed processes, done personal development, taken a course, invested in themselves, and maybe you don't like that person. And that's valid. Not everyone's going to be for everyone, right? But sometimes that can hold us back because we have this belief that investing in ourselves, working with a coach, taking a program, even just following along with a self-development book, we can have this identity around the people who do that. And it doesn't always serve us well. Because there are a lot of amazing people that you probably really like and respect who've done a lot of work on themselves, but they don't fit that type. So we just don't think about them. So it's worth challenging who you'll become and whether you think that you'll be like that other person. Now, another one is maybe I will grow apart from others. So when we think about our relationships and we think about making change, this is often where you will start to have this belief that if I actually change this thing in my life, that it is going to maybe make me grow apart. Maybe I won't have as much in common with these people, whether that's your friends or your family or loved ones. And it's an important question to ask, but oftentimes we can show up as a better version. And sometimes the people around us might be inspired by the changes that we are making if we are taking action and taking control. And that might actually help them by living by example, not by telling them how to be, but by showing by example what can happen when you take the time to get over the hurdles and to change the things that you are currently unhappy with. Now, finally, the last belief on this list is maybe I won't like what I'll discover and maybe I can't handle what I discover. So this is connected to this fear around shadow self and uncovering parts of yourself that you don't like. Now, a big reason we feel like we are not ready to confront our shadow self or these darker sides of ourselves is that we are worried we're going to discover something about ourselves that we hate, or we are worried that we are not really equipped to handle what we uncover. Now, personally, in my experience over the years, working in different retreats and going to sessions and development and facilitators workshops, I've really got the point driven home around you typically will only uncover what you are able to handle. And that our brain is very powerful and doesn't usually let us get exposed to things that we're not quite ready to handle yet. So there's this level of resistance that we will often experience that will kind of keep us safe from going a little bit too deeper than we are able to do. However, there's always a spectrum. And so sometimes we feel like we just can't handle anything negative about ourselves and it'll keep us back. But in actual fact, you have probably over the years learned things about yourself that you don't love, that you're not proud of, but you've been able to handle them, or you've been able to work on them and identify what they are and where they come from and do that work. So I have a feeling that you might be stronger than you think you are if one of your beliefs is that you can't really handle or you're not equipped to deal with what you uncover if you start to do this work. So I know it's kind of vague to talk generally about why we can't change something, but I really do think that a lot of us recognize when we want to get unstuck, and it's really important to us, but we don't necessarily take action. And if you are finding yourself in this sort of personal development trap, where you learn about something, you see why it works, maybe it's watching a video like this and saying, oh, I understand it, this makes sense to me, I want to change, but then you don't do it. So hopefully these 3 different steps will help you identify what's going on. And as always, I like you to start with the top. So asking, what information or skills do I need to work on? Then yourself, and then get into those beliefs. There's a very good chance that it's a combination of all 3. And that is one of the things that I am doing with my Thrive from the Inside program, is helping you go through a specific process that will help you uncover why you are stuck, ask the right questions, and also get to discover yourself. And the thing that I love about it is it actually gives you tools. So it builds your ability and your skill set to be able to get unstuck in the future. And so I have a quote here talking about how the tools that I teach in Thrive from the Inside are ones that can be applied to multiple problems. So in other words, I am giving you technical skills and an ability to be able to tackle future roadblocks. But in the actual program, we will pick a goal, something that you want to get unstuck with, and we'll follow that throughout. So if that is something that you want to do, if you are someone who is better with external accountability, you work well in a group environment, you like to hear other people who are going through the same thing as you at the same time, then I really think this could be a good fit. Registration closes on Tuesday, October the 6th, and we kick off on October 13th. And if you are watching this replay and that has passed, stay tuned for a future version. But all the details about the program are at myhappyinsides.com/thrive. Now, I hope that's given you some food for thought, because a group program is not right for everyone, and I acknowledge that. So what is it that will help you, and why are you not taking action to get unstuck when you have identified that there is a roadblock and that you want to change? Follow those different levels, the ways we get stuck, and ask yourself the right questions so that hopefully you can get unstuck and start thriving.